We're happy to have you join us today. And I'm pleased and thrilled and honored to welcome our special guest, Kristin Warzocha. Kristin has served at the food bank for 20 years and currently leads the organization as president and CEO. Prior, she worked at the American Red Cross and at Harvest for Hunger. At the food bank, she leads a team of almost 150 and coordinates efforts with more than 1,000 partner agencies and programs throughout Northeast Ohio. Prior to the pandemic, she was already serving 350,000 people in Cuyahoga, Ashtabula, Geauga, Lake, Ashland, and Richland counties. You are probably familiar with the warehouse that sits just off of the Shoreway in the Collinwood neighborhood, but her innovative leadership has adapted during the pandemic so that she is now serving thousands more at the Muni Lot. She has a lot of awards and recognitions to her name. Most recently, she was a Northeast Ohio Most Influential Woman, and she was just named as a Crain's Woman of Note for 2020. She is a proud alum of Cleveland Bridge Builders 2002 and Leadership Cleveland 2010, and we are honored to have her as a member of the Cleveland Leadership Center Board. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kristin.
Well, thank you, Marianne. It's a real privilege to be with you all here today. I'm a huge fan of the Leadership Center, as you may have inferred from the amount of time I've spent with the organization and learned so much through both the Bridge Builders program and also the Leadership Cleveland program. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to serve on the board of the Leadership Center, as well as to serve as the president and CEO of the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. As I look around this call, we've got a lot of great friends and supporters. So thank you for your time today. The food bank would not be what it is without really an extraordinary group of not only staff leaders, but also board leaders, community partners, and community members who support us in such a long list of ways. This really is the community's food bank. I hope that most of you have had the chance to tour our facility, our 120,000 square foot facility in the Collinwood Yards neighborhood. Many people come to visit us for the first time as a volunteer. We have about 21,000 people who donate their time every year to help make meals in our community kitchen, to help repackage donations, to pack boxes of bags for special programs, and we are what we are because of this community. The fact is that the last 3 months have certainly presented a pretty long list of challenges, as all of you know, and yet I'm really proud of the way our organization and so many organizations have stepped up to try to address them. There is a lot happening in our world today. We've got a pandemic, as we all know, an economic crisis, more people unemployed now than there were during the Great Recession, according to some recent data that I saw. 1 million Ohioans who are out of work. And we also have centuries of racial injustice that have come to a head. All of this in a 3-month period, and all of this, in my view, related. I think that every leader has their hands full, and every Ohioan and American has their hands full trying to navigate and help our organizations navigate through these incredibly challenging circumstances. I am grateful to work for an organization that's got a lot of talented leaders at all levels, and also where there's a lot that we can do to respond and to help. Marianne gave kind of a lovely high-level summary of what we do and the clients that we serve. I would also share that in addition to the work that we're doing to try to address hunger today by providing nutritious food through our network of programmatic partners to clients who need us across our service area, over a number of years now, we've really been investing in how we can also try to address hunger tomorrow. How do we address the issues that underlie hunger, that contribute to food insecurity? Because until those issues are addressed, a lot of our clients will always be in line at a food pantry. And we would rather see them in line at a grocery store. And the way to do that is to help them address issues associated with food, with housing, and with employment. which are the three largest drivers of food insecurity. And so for quite a number of years now, we've had a help center on our second floor where folks in need of food can call in to be connected to resources. But in addition to connecting them to an agency in their neighborhood, we can also connect them to other nonprofit partners who are experts in housing or experts in employment based on the needs of the client. We also are the only nonprofit in the state that is completing SNAP applications and other public benefit applications over the phone in large volume. And again, that's about kind of helping people be more food secure in the future. And that work is just critical. So in terms of our COVID-19 response, I think the first thing that became really apparent was this health crisis that we're all well aware of. We activated our disaster plan in mid-March. Now, truth be told, we did not have a pandemic section to our disaster plan, but we did have a thoughtful, kind of a thoughtful list of all of the different functions that would be important to our organization, things we needed to keep moving and lean into in the event of any sort of disaster. We also had staff people from across the organization, kind of 3 deep, assigned to each of those functions. And so we began meeting daily with our disaster team to begin to address issues that were cropping up and to try to work together to find solutions to those problems. I would say of our 150 staff people, probably 45 of them are part of this disaster team. And it's a big group, but they also have had extraordinary input and impact as we have looked for ways to respond. When this first began, I think a couple of things became apparent right off the bat. The first thing that happened was that we had 1,400 volunteers cancel their shift in a 1-week period. So I mentioned how important volunteers are to our operation. Many of them come with a corporate group or a school group. And so when folks stopped gathering at work and they stopped going to school, right, for very good reasons, all of those groups started to cancel. And we realized that, we do already, I suppose, that as a food bank, we can't operate without volunteers. The labor that they contribute to help us distribute food is just critical. And so here we were in a time of incredible demand, with volunteers falling left and right. And so we asked the governor to deploy the National Guard. We did that as part of the Ohio Association of Food Banks and asked him to deploy National Guardsmen to every food bank, all 12 food banks across Ohio. And within a week, he agreed. And that I am still grateful for today. You may see over my shoulder a National Guardsman walking by. We've got about 65 of them deployed to the food bank, and they've been doing almost every job that a volunteer would traditionally do and then some, because we've got new projects that frankly we hadn't considered before that have become really necessary. We also revised all of our HR policies to respond to the crisis so that we could continue to operate as an essential service. We've been open since the beginning of this, but also so we could try to protect the health and safety of our staff. Offering additional PTO should someone feel sick so they don't feel obligated to come into work, right? God forbid, should someone be diagnosed, letting them take those days paid so they're not feeling like they need to rush back. Offering flexibility for folks who might be higher risk or who have had childcare issues at home, because we know someday we're going to come out on the other side of this. We love our team. We're proud of our team. We want them all with us. We also pretty quickly turned our monthly produce distribution into a drive-through distribution. At the beginning, that was supposed to be a one-time event. On the third Thursday of every month, we distribute fresh produce out of our facility. We've been doing it for years. The way it has traditionally worked is that clients have the opportunity to come inside our facility and pick from a wonderful selection of fresh produce that they can take home. We focused on fresh produce because it's so important to a healthy diet, because there are not a lot of partners in our immediate neighborhood who have access to as much fresh produce as their clients can take. The agencies don't all have the refrigeration capacity. And we had one of those coming up on the third Thursday of March, and we realized very quickly we couldn't pull 1,000 people into our warehouse safely. Many of the clients who attend those produce distribution are senior citizens. They come with canes and walkers and oxygen, and we knew it wasn't possible. And so the team turned that into a drive-through distribution over the course of really less than a week. And it was so well attended. I think we served 1,200 families the first time that we knew that one was not going to be enough. And so we decided to do it again the next week. By the next week, we had traffic copters hovering over our parking lot because the traffic was backed up for miles in every possible direction. The Cleveland police essentially ended the lines for safety purposes because you couldn't get in or out of this neighborhood. And we served about 1,700 families that week. So we realized that, this was an important way for people who were in need of food, many for the very first time, to access food, and yet our current facility just didn't have the capacity. I mean, frankly, we didn't have enough parking to accommodate it. And so we reached out to the city and asked for what I believe to be the biggest parking lot in town. And we have been in the Muni lot every Thursday afternoon since. They continued to grow. At our high, we served 3,600 families in one Thursday afternoon in the Muni lot. Last week, we served 1,700 families in the Muni lot. And so clearly the demand is still there. I think we've served about 26,000 families, 80,000 individuals in just that one distribution alone. The reason we've continued to do that on a weekly basis is because we know that the need is there, the demand is there, and also because a lot of our current and traditional partners are closed and have remained closed. Marianne mentioned that we serve more than 1,000 programmatic partners in 6 counties. While many of those are traditional food pantries where a client can go in and get a bag of food, or a hot meal site where a client can go in and get one meal, we also have a lot of really creative programs and program partners, schools, for example, in low-income neighborhoods where we're providing after-school meals, senior congregate meal sites where we're providing meals or groceries to seniors. And, as you all know, every school closed. Schools are still closed. And so 90 of our 100 after-school partners closed right away. And those are kids that no longer had access to free and reduced price school lunches. A very long list of our senior sites closed for safety reasons, many of which have still not reopened. And so the drive-through distribution, and now we're up to drive-through distributions in 3 locations, has become an important way to serve people who are unable to access maybe a program in their neighborhood, or people who just don't know where to go because they're in need of help for the first time. We've talked to a number of clients, and at the beginning, about 1/3 of the clients that we were serving had never needed help from the emergency food system before. And they were folks who had had their hours cut, had lost their job for the first time ever, and they had no idea that the service might be available, or that there might be an agency in their neighborhood. And so when they saw on the news they could come to the Muni lot, they did. And we were there, and we will continue to be there. We also started advocating because, simply from a healthcare perspective, as we learned more about this disease together, traditionally when we're serving clients, we're asking for a lot of information. We're required to distribute the food we receive from the state of Ohio and the federal government, which are 2 important food sources to us. We're required to capture information like name and address, a number of people in the family, and are they income eligible? And traditionally, income eligibility is 200% of poverty or less. Well, screaming those questions at a senior citizen behind the wheel of her car in a loud parking lot from 6 feet away, and gathering all that information not only slows things down, but it's just not safe, right? And so what happens, and I saw it many times, is, a well-meaning volunteer or staff person is trying to hear the answer, and they lean in. And so we were struggling to distribute food, following guidelines, while also practicing safe social distancing. And so we appealed to the governor again for a waiver, which ultimately came through the federal government, but had to be requested by the state, which helped reduce the amount of paperwork that we were collecting in the short term. Which was also really important to the food bank, but also to our partner agencies, because obviously we want to keep those volunteers and those staff as safe as possible. I think we're working now on how do we continue to respond at a high level, and how do we try to find ways to ensure that this is sustainable, certainly for the foreseeable future. As I've talked to community leaders and those who are watching unemployment closely, I certainly believe that these challenges will exist into 2021 and maybe 2022. And so how do we continue to operate at this high level and also pull some things that are really important strategically kind of back onto our plate that are important for the future of our community and the future of the food bank. So, we've got the drive-through distributions, which I mentioned, the one in the Muni lot. We also have started a drive-through distribution out at Lakeland Community College because we knew from the data that that was an area that was underserved with a lot of additional need and just not enough resources to meet that need. Another community like that is Parma. And so we are starting a drive-through distribution in Parma in a couple of weeks, which we hope and expect will continue. We also have been doing home delivery, which is something I never imagined the food bank doing. We've worked traditionally through our network partners. The fact is, COVID-19 has put us in the position of having to be a direct service provider because the need is so high, and yet a lot of our traditional partners just aren't in a position where they can respond. And so, we had some clients who called our help center and we really didn't have an option for them. They were in need of food, some cases in pretty desperate need of food. And every agency in their neighborhood was closed, or they didn't have a car that they could use to get to our drive-through distribution. Or frankly, they were frail and elderly and their doctor had said, don't leave the house under any circumstances. And they had no one to bring them food. And so we are doing a couple hundred home deliveries a week. We also doubled our Backpack for Kids program. We're distributing almost 10,000 bags of food a week. It's 6 meals in each bag. And we're doing that through some new partners. So CMSD, for example, the schools that they kept open to do after school meals, Parma schools, other schools in underserved neighborhoods, we're providing those backpacks. And then we're also working really closely with a number of local vendors who are participating in the new federal Farmers to Families program, which was developed very quickly and rolled out in support of farmers. But we're providing some beautiful fresh produce to families and also boxes of dairy and meat items. And so we're trying to take advantage of the food that is available to us. But, we also do have to think about how do we continue, as I said earlier, to do this in the long run. And we're also thinking a lot about, what's been happening in our community and in our country in the response to, the murder of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and what happened to Christian Cooper in New York City and the role we play there. The fact is, we know that Black Americans are twice as likely to be poor and twice as likely to be food insecure. And that is related to systemic racism. And back in 2018, when we completed our most recent strategic plan, our 3-year plan, we decided that we wanted to make diversity, equity, and inclusion strengths of our organization. And that is a bold statement. And so at the time, we asked for volunteers and assembled a really wonderful internal council with staff members who were interested in helping us from every department and every single level of the organization. And they developed an internal DEI plan and have been working on implementing it. But, now that we've all seen, these terrible atrocities in front of our very eyes captured on video, we're asking ourselves, what more can we do and what more should we do? Because if we want to help clients address, or if we want to address some of the underlying issues that contribute to food insecurity, well, systemic racism is one. So the weekend after the protests started, the Monday after the protests started, we did release a statement. We're the first food bank in Ohio to do so, and one of the first food banks in the nation. And I think it was really important, and it was a way of saying, you know, we're committed to doing our part to speak up and to try to help move forward as a community and as a country. So we're celebrating Juneteenth on Friday here at the food bank. We had a great meeting last week of our DEI council, where everybody on the council really talked about how they were feeling given, you know, recent events, and how they wanted to do more. I think Tamika's on the call. Tamika helped facilitate that conversation. It was a great one. And we're continuing to build out our plan in a way that we can support our clients and continue to stay focused on our important work. You know, as I think about the future post COVID-19, you know, I hope and I believe that we can come out stronger on the other side. You know, I often say that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I'm a true believer. You know, we've learned a lot as an organization. We have been more flexible through this. Our team has been more flexible through this and more creative than I think we knew was possible. And there's a residue from that that I think is going to stick with us, that we want to keep. And I think the work that a lot of people are investing in around diversity and the reduction of systemic racism, that's work that needs to be done. And I hope that what we've all seen and learned over the last couple of months can inspire us. I think it needs to inspire us to continue to move forward and to do better. How am I doing on time? I may be a few minutes over. So that's what the food bank's been up to over the course of the last couple of months. And I'm happy to open it up to questions.
Great. Kristin, thank you so much for sharing all that you have done just in the past few months and in looking ahead. We do have a few questions that have come in. As you look to the needs that you see in the community, how do you identify and serve priority areas of need?
That's a great question. You know, we've always been an organization that's committed to data, but the data we look at changes over time, and we're trying to be very strategic. We created a new group, a data and outcomes group on our team after the last strategic plan. And so in addition to using GIS mapping, we're also getting a lot of additional feedback directly from clients about how we can provide more and better service. This GIS mapping, though, allows us to look at areas of high poverty, but also areas of food stamp usage, and the number of agencies in that community, and the number of people who are income eligible for our services, and then who we're missing. And so we are strategically trying to make sure that we are increasing programmatic partners and doing more direct service in this case, at this time, in those communities where we know a lot of people are being missed. The three top communities with the highest number of income eligible people who are not receiving food from one of our partner agencies are Parma, Euclid, and Brooklyn Heights. And that often catches people by surprise. But, you know, poverty and working poor families certainly are out in our inner ring suburbs, and there simply are not as many agencies to serve them. So we think about that and use that in our planning.
You mentioned discussing how you sustain the efforts that you've implemented over the past few months. So as you look ahead for the next 6 to 12 months, how do you sustain this effort?
So I think there are a number of things that we're going to need to do there. We're talking internally about kind of moving into our own phase two. You know, for phase one, the first 12 weeks was disaster response. It was really 24/7 disaster response, dealing with new challenges every day and new opportunities every day. I think that we've created a lot of things now that are necessary that we need to continue to do for the foreseeable future, whether it's a drive-through distribution or heightened distribution through our Backpack for Kids program or home deliveries of groceries. So I think the good news is that a lot of that formation is done. Now we're kind of tweaking new things we're doing, and so we have to continue there. We also have to pull back onto our plate, this DEI work. We had that committee had a couple months off as we were responding in disaster mode. That committee needs to meet again, and they are. And we also need to think about our long-term future. We had just started planning for an expansion project when this hit. And the fact is that that is more needed than ever now. We are absolutely out of space in our facility and beyond out of space. We've got offsite frozen storage, offsite dry storage, and 4 rented trailers on our property right now, which complicates matters. So we need to make room for that too. The good news is that the community has been very generous. And so when we look at cash flow and we look at the level of our response, we should be able to continue providing additional food at this level to additional clients into next year through next April. Doesn't take us all the way through next year, but at least we've got, the next 6 or 8 months, or 10 months really, in view we know that we can afford to do that, which is really important. And that's because the community's been generous.
And speaking of the community and how we can support the work that you're doing, what are ways and what are some needs that you have where the community can step up and support the food bank?
So we're always looking for the community to help in a variety of different ways. Folks have been very generous with financial gifts, which we appreciate. We also are starting to bring volunteers back in. We'd put that on hold for safety purposes for a while. And because frankly, with National Guard in our building, we're practicing social distancing. We couldn't put a bunch of volunteers in our repack room with the National Guard because there just wasn't space to be 6 feet apart. But we're starting to bring back volunteers at non-traditional times. And we've had volunteers help us in the Muni Lot every Thursday afternoon, which has been great. We're also always looking for advocates. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on advocacy over the last couple of months, reaching out to our elected officials about extra food because we've needed extra food, but also waivers that have improved safety or allowed our clients to access resources more effectively. And then, just other support. We happen to have our biggest annual fundraising event, Market at the Food Bank, which many people on this call have been to. Traditionally, we turn our distribution center into an amazing kind of party venue and have 1,000 guests and 50 chefs. Well, that's off the table. 1,000 chefs and 50 guests is not happening right now or anytime soon. And so as many nonprofits have, we've gotten creative and turned that into more of a virtual event. It's called Market at Home. It starts next week. So every night next week, there's going to be a Facebook Live. And essentially what we've done is we've taken what we would normally spend on the expenses of throwing a big party, valet parking and all of that good stuff. And we're putting it into supporting the local restaurants who've supported us for many, many years through those events. And every sponsor who was on board for Market at the Food Bank has shifted their sponsorship to Market at Home. So every night we'll be talking a little bit about the food bank's response to COVID-19. We'll have special guests, and we'll also have some sort of really cool food-related content. So we've got a chef here at the food bank Monday night back in our community kitchen who's going to be sharing a recipe. And so I'd encourage folks to tune in or to think about supporting that in some way.
Kristin, thank you so much for sharing your work and the work of your team to meet the needs of the community over the past few months and again, looking ahead. And we will be sure to share information about the upcoming event in our follow-up email so everyone can learn more and hopefully participate in that. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Marianne.
Thanks, Rachel. And Kristin, thanks for all that you do for the Food Bank, for the Leadership Center, and for our Greater Cleveland community every day. I know you have been working incredibly long hours every day of the week when many of us have had the luxury of being able to work from home. So thank you for truly being on the front line for us.
Privilege.